All right, so in this video, we're going to look at the church in medieval Western Europe. So remember, when we think about medieval period, we're thinking about Europe in time period 3. That's where we are right now. So in the last video, we looked at the kind of social and economic system called feudalism and how that helped to keep order. What we're going to do in this video is kind of superimpose another layer of complexity onto that feudal system. So we're going to think about how the church helped to maintain order. Now, in medieval Europe, Christianity served the same purpose that we've seen in the Islamic world and in India and in China, in that it helps with daily needs. So churches kind of serve the same purpose as mosques or Buddhist temples or Hindu temples. They help with daily needs. So they provide services like food in emergencies. They provide a level of education. They provide orphanages. One thing that we don't really see is a lot of banking, like you might see in a Buddhist temple or a Hindu temple, and that's mostly because there's not much money. But all the other services that you might see in a Buddhist temple or in a mosque, churches are going to do the same thing in medieval Western Europe. They're also going to provide missionaries to spread the religion. And so we might think about these missionaries the same way we might think about the Sufi Muslims. And even though they're not really intending to do this, we might think about like Buddhist merchants, I guess unofficially, spreading Buddhism. Like India, Western Europe was pretty disunited. It was very decentralized. So Christianity helps to keep order too. Like Hinduism did in India. So I'm going to draw another little triangle to kind of show you the Christian social hierarchy. And if you'd like, you could just impose this on top of the feudal system because they're pretty much happening at the same time. This is divided into 3 sections. At the top, we have those who pray, the clergy. So because this is a religious social hierarchy, they're going to be at the top, just like the priests are at the top of an Indian social hierarchy. Beneath them, they would consider those who fight. And these guys would be the nobility. And then beneath them, we have those who work. And that's everyone else. So at the top of this social hierarchy, you've got the clergy, and then you've got the nobility, and then you've got everyone else. Now, in this social hierarchy, the Pope helps to keep order, because the Pope is at the very tippy top of this social hierarchy. So he helps to keep order by keeping the political leaders, who in this social hierarchy are beneath him, in line. So he helps to keep order by keeping the political leaders in line. And when I say in line, that's his line. This is what the Pope wants. And he does this through the power of excommunication. This is a big deal in the Christian church. So let's take a second and talk about what that means. Excommunication basically cuts a person off from God. The church says that you need a priest to talk to God for you. Like, you can't talk to God on your own. You have to talk to a priest, and the priest will talk to God for you, and then the priest will tell you what God says. Excommunication prevents you from the ceremonies involved in talking to priests. And if you can't talk to priests, then you go to hell. If you can't talk to God, you go to hell. And that is a really big punishment. So, people listen to the Pope because that is a big punishment. So when we think about this debate between popes versus kings, it certainly seems right now that the popes, these guys are winners, or at least they're winning right now. So the Pope helps to keep order by keeping the kings in line through their power of excommunication. There's another issue that involves the church and the Pope. The Pope has a limited reach. And so if you're outside his reach, you're probably okay. You're probably okay to do what you like. So, for example, like the people in the kingdom of Axum, the Pope doesn't really know what's going on there, and so they're just kind of left to their own devices. We could say the same thing about Christians in Central Asia. They're so far away from the Pope that they just kind of do their own thing, and the Pope doesn't really know what they're doing and if he doesn't like it or not. But the Pope wants uniformity. He wants everyone doing things the same way. So if he doesn't know what you're doing, if you're so far away, he can't really do anything about you. But if he does know what you're doing, he's going to want you to do things his way. And the problem is that over time, Christians in the Byzantine Empire started practicing Christianity a little different. So there are Christians that are out there doing their own thing, and the Pope doesn't really know, and what the Pope doesn't know doesn't really affect him. But there are a group of Christians that are right next door that are starting to do things differently, and the Pope doesn't like that. So why do they do things differently? Well, there's two good reasons for that. The first is just they're far away, and over time, things change. This is true of everything. So the farther away you are, and the longer you're away from the Pope, the more different your Christianity is going to be. So we're just talking about like little things. Like, for instance, Byzantine priests don't shave. They have big, bushy beards. But Western priests shave. It's a little difference, but it's just a difference in interpretation. Byzantine priests use leavened bread in their ceremonies, bread that has risen, like bread that you would get at a grocery store. Western priests use unleavened bread. So this is essentially like something like a cracker or matzah, something like that. It isn't risen. Again, little differences. This is the kind of stuff that the Pope wants to get rid of, but these differences are going to persist. And the longer that they are, far away and disconnected from the Pope, the more these little differences are going to exist. But the bigger reason why they do things differently is that idea of Caesaropapism. The Byzantine emperor is in charge of religion in the Byzantine Empire, and the Pope can't control him. And so these two things together are going to cause a split in the church. Now, the first evidence of this split happens in the year 711 with the idea of iconoclasm. Iconoclasm. That's an S. Without getting too deep into this, in the Byzantine Empire, they said that pictures in church services were forbidden. No pictures. In Western churches, pictures were okay. Now, here's an interesting bit of interaction. This Byzantine idea may be related to the Islamic prohibition against depictions of humans in art. Maybe that is kind of what's influencing this Byzantine idea that we can't have any pictures in our church services, because in Islamic art you can't show pictures of people, which is why it's very, very inappropriate to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. That's very, very taboo in Islam. But there's no influence like that in Western Europe, so the pictures were okay. Now, eventually, iconoclasm goes away, and the Byzantines allow pictures again. But in the 800s. But the damage was done. The two churches are starting to split apart. So we see some initial cracks. Byzantine priests don't shave. Western priests do. That's not a big deal. But the more little things like this, and an environment in which the Pope doesn't control what's going on in the Byzantine Empire, leads to things like this, and those cracks just keep growing. And now it looks like we have two different churches. And officially, the church is split in the year 1054. And this date gives us what's known to history as the Great Schism. A schism is a fancy word for a split or a divorce. Without getting too into the weeds about how the Great Schism happened, the new pope in 1054 tries to exert authority over the Byzantine churches and, by extension, the Byzantine emperor. And his patriarch. So what ends up happening is that the Pope is shown a forged document that says he has all this extra authority. He doesn't. It's forged. It was a fake. But he tries to exert this authority over the Byzantine churches and the Byzantine emperor. What ends up happening is that in response to this, the patriarch excommunicates the Pope, and the Pope excommunicates the patriarch. And so now we have two churches. We have the Catholic Church, centered in Rome, and we have the Orthodox Church, centered in Constantinople. And what's really ironic about the names of these two churches, Orthodox and Catholic, mean the same thing. So in Greek, Orthodox means this. In Latin, Catholic, they both mean the same word. They both mean universal, but in different languages. The Catholic Church means universal. It's the universal truth, or it's the universal church that has the universal truth. Same thing in Greek. So now we end up with two Christian churches. And the split happens unofficially, probably about 500 years before this, but it officially happens in the year 1054. The last thing I want to add about the church in medieval Europe in time period 3 is that now there is an official Catholic Christianity. There's official stuff. Which means that now education, which is found in churches and cathedrals, this education has to be approved by the church. So whatever they're teaching you in a church school or in a cathedral school, otherwise known as a university, this stuff has to be approved by the church. There are going to be military orders, so military groups formed to promote this official Christianity. They're going to try to adapt Greek and Roman philosophy to fit this official Christianity. And what this also means is that if you go against the church, there are also enemies of the church who believe unofficial Christianity. And it's okay to eliminate these people. These people are known as heretics. And unofficial Christianity is known as heresy. So the church is going to try to impose order on Western Europe in time period 3 because there is this lack of centralized government. The church is going to try to fit that. It's going to try to impose that centrality on Western Europe. And they're going to do a pretty good job of it. So in our next video, which will be our last video on Europe in time period 3, we're going to talk about the consequences of this split in the churches by looking at the Crusades. So until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.